All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Black Men Speak. Tommy Duncan and Jimmy Stewart, where we talk about provocative issues impacting our community. So what I'd like to do is have everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the topic of the day. My name is Tommy Duncan. We also have...
I'm Jimmy Stewart.
And then as our special guest,
Charles O'Neill.
All right, good deal. One of the things we'd like to talk about today is the Black Tax, The Cost of Being Black in America, which is a book and a YouTube video that was done by Shauna Rochester. It brought up some very provocative issues talking about the economic impact of being black in America. And so we wanted to kind of have a discussion and see what people think about that. I know that I, myself, and Jimmy, you also had a chance to kind of at least look at the video. Charles, I don't know. I know conceptually you probably know what we're dealing with, because basically what Sean has done, he has put a dollar figure on the impact of the Africans in America, what we call African Americans, during slavery and then since then, and talked about where that gap is in terms of equity and what's happening there. So just wanted to get some general thoughts and then dig down into more specific questions. So what were your thoughts on this, Jimmy?
Actually, it really opened my eyes to a few things. One, we talk about the net worth of black people today and what our net worth was in slavery and compared the two. That was eye-opening. One of the biggest things that caught my attention was you talked about resumes and then applicants, how they would take a resume and send it out to employers and put a black name on it versus a white name. The white name would get so many responses, twice as many responses and callback as the black name. You talk about the law firm where that had, I guess, maybe like 60 partners in it. They sent a letter that supposedly came from a white associate to 30 other partners and sent the same letter, just changed the name where it came from a black associate to the same of our partner. And they made sure that it had mistakes in there and misinformation, errors in facts, and how the black letter was more scrutinized and heavily graded and criticized versus the white letter. I had always been one that I try to believe that hopefully the nation is getting better as a country, that racism and discrimination is the things that are of the past and slowly are fading away. Because in my lifetime I've been hired for jobs where I've never even seen the person interviewing me. They interviewed me on the phone. It was all they heard was my voice, knew my name and my resume, what I could do, and got hired. So to me, in my world, I didn't see a lot of what he's talking about, but now I'm starting to see that maybe the country hasn't made as much progress as I thought. This is still, if simply a name can make a determination, if I'm Shaniqua versus Elizabeth versus on the resume, that right there can make a difference. If a name can make a difference, then certainly appearing for an interview and a person can see you, obviously has to make a difference. And even though we may think that we're, post-racial society now, racism and colors at least is still having some effect on our decision making. So it was eye-opening. It was something I think it's worth seeing the video, reading the book, certainly worthy of a discussion.
One of the things that I thought that was pretty interesting is that, pretty sharp guy, obviously has a background in technology and economics, and he decided to reduce the conversation to something that was less emotional and more economic. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, Charles, and given your background and kind of your investment over the past several decades in terms of growing business within the black community. Whether you've seen it or not, I know you could probably speak to the economic impact of the black community in America in general and us as individual economic bodies. What are your thoughts on where we were and where we are in terms of our economic impact?
Listening to you both, the thing that flashed to me immediately was a book called Two Nations.
Two Nations, okay.
Separate, unequal, and divided.
Andrew Hackert? Gotcha.
Andrew Hackert, right? And he nearly lost his job over this book.
Ooh.
Right? White professor at
that's right. He was black.
City College of New York. And he did this experiment in his classroom, and he says, goes around the room, he says to one of his white students, "I'm sorry, sir, we made a mistake on your birth certificate." You talked about it in the other segment. But you're black, and we want to compensate you for our mistake, right? There was no amount of money that the students would accept as compensation for having to live from that point forward as a black person in America. And so there can be no more graphic illustration of the black tax or what the impacts of being identified as black have on your economic prospects. This was a student who said, "Why you pick me?" You know, I don't know. There's no amount of money that you can give me to make me live my life as a black person in this America, even as things have improved.
What do you think is the basis for that?
Of white folk.
Yes. I mean, it may sound like a simple question. Give me your
There's another book. It's kind of it's out of print, so it might be a little more difficult to find. It's called Alienable Rights, and it's by two professors, white professors.
ALIEN, alienable.
Alienable Rights, and their thesis is that there was never a time in America's history, from the First Continental Congress to today, that there was ever any intent for black folk to benefit from their presence in America. And so that's pretty eye-opening and a pretty critical assessment of the country. So despite our active involvement from Bunker Hill to Afghanistan and Iraq as protectors of this country, the very formation of the country had no design for you to have ever benefited from whatever the government created as this country. And so I often point to those two books because they were written by white folk,
Right.
and demonstrate very clearly that they've always known what the impacts of their approach to building America were on black folk or non-white folk, because clearly Native Americans and Latinos have experience as well. And so when Make America Great Again is pronounced from the rooftops, it's very clear that the sub-message is, let's get back to our founding intent, which was to be a very exclusive haven for a Eurocentric, white-dominant country. You said earlier, and again, as I mentioned to you, words do have meaning. And we talk about the prospects of this country becoming a majority-minority country, when in fact it is. Because numerically, white folk are a minority in the world.
Right.
You know, and so we've got this twisted thing in our head that, you know, I talked to a group of African scholars. They're here for, it was a government, program that brought scholars from across the world, and 50 of them were assembled in San Antonio a couple of years ago. They talk of themselves, they describe themselves as minority. They're from Africa.
Africans.
Because this propagandizing of perspective from a Western perspective. Western perspective is so omniscient, is so ever-present, everywhere. Omnipresent rather than omniscient is everywhere. And so when there's no mystery to me, and this is way off this subject, but there's no mystery to me why North and South Korea can have a cordial conversation. It's because they're cousins. And then until 70 years ago, they got this
Right.
this line drawn through their country. They didn't decide to draw that
Right.
line. You know, there were other interests at play that decided that they had some land or resources that we needed. We needed more than, and it was more valuable to the U.S. and communism to fight over than it was of interest to the people who lived there. And so all of this is a piece of this conversation. Yes, in fact, there is a tax attached to living black in America, absolutely. But it's a function of a whole bigger thing that's going on across the world.
One thing that I found pretty interesting, he had made a statement of, in essence, a 100% tax on black people in America. 100% tax, because in essence, your human capital, your physical capital, anything that they may consider to be intellectually capital, was 100% tax, which means that you put everything in and you get practically nothing back in return on that. We had talked about, the American premise of, no taxation without representation. But you put your entire life into a system and you get very little in return. In addition to that, we talked about the economic of black folks in America, even considering what we contribute to our local, state, or national economy. But when we look at the economic results within our community, we're looking at maybe 1 to 1.5%. When you talk about that 100%, or even if it's just 99% taxation, what are your thoughts when you heard that 100% tax concept on that? And then the question is, what is it that we need to start doing to change the narrative on that, so we can start looking at figuring out what is our roadmap to changing the corner? If we're talking about 100% taxation or even a 99% taxation, if we're spending $1 trillion, annually as a community, we're talking about a $20 trillion economy per se, and we put everything in, getting very little out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
I never considered 100% taxation, but
I never thought about it either until I watched the video, and so he does have a point. So here's the thing, that when you look at a person motivated to work, and you look at taxation and you have a sliding scale. Of course, if Uncle Sam came to us and said, Tommy, Charles, Jimmy, I'm going to attach your income at 100%. We quit our jobs tomorrow. We just want to go back. What would be the point? You wouldn't be motivated to go. If the scale was down to 0%, we may be inspired to go out and even work more so we keep more of our money. Somewhere up in there, as the scale goes from 0 and approaches 100, you have a point where people will live with it and accept it and take it. But then there are points that if you go too high, too close to 100, you're going to shut down production. They were able to tax at 100% because black folks did not get a paycheck. They woke up every day without a paycheck, but yet woke up every day before the sunrise to do some of the hardest work in America. It wouldn't stop until the sun set. We're talking minimum 12-hour days in the summertime, probably 14, 15-hour days in the peak of summer, probably 12 hours during the winter months, but still I always imagine the mindset, what would it take to actually get up every day under those conditions? I don't know if I could do it. I mean, I certainly couldn't do it with today's mindset. So for those people that have to deal with that psychologically, of working that long every day with no benefit whatsoever, to come out of that system, and we're talking about the sharecropper system, how the land, the 40 acres, the land that was confiscated from the South was all given back to the plantation owners. Once they accepted the pledge to re-enter the U.S. as citizens, and for these people to have to go back to work, the Jim Crow laws, the vagrancy laws that would force them to go back to work for the person you just came out of bondage with, and then for you to be in debt to them where you could never get out, no matter how much you worked and raised. So that whole structure, those people had to be mentally tough to deal with that and to have some kind of hope that things were going to get better, because I just don't know if I could have held on mentally or physically under that condition.
To really have a conversation about this that results in some resolution, we gotta get context, you know, and so I think what you just said, Jimmy, captures perfectly part of the dilemma is that if, in fact, the answer to what we've experienced, black folk have experienced in this country, is to find some comfortable place in the existing construct.
Right.
That's one kind of answer. But it has to be reconciled against, again, the very experiences that you just illustrated, is our initial value was labor. And if we accept that a fundamental tenet of capitalism is controlling the means of production, that was us.
Mm-hmm.
And once that was removed from the plate, you didn't have a value. And so there was, again, if we accept that there was no
We talked
intent-
about that once slavery ended, the impact, let's say just on the balance sheet for a plantation owner, that collectively the 4 million slaves at that time were worth about $20 trillion. They were about 1/5 of the economy of the U.S. Now you take it off the balance sheet, you remove that. I mean, that was a lot of wealth that just went away like that.
That's interesting. Money didn't go away. They moved it on books. See what I'm saying? I mean, so I couldn't get your work anymore, but you're not gonna tell me I'm worth less today. So I mean, you know, so entire industries were founded on the fact that this much. So if you're saying the money went away, then we wouldn't have a
Well, off the balance sheet, but
we wouldn't have a
right.
Lehman Brothers, right?
It shifted.
You know.
Because he also talked about how
He talked about going from
the sharecropper system to the rented leased labor from the state for prisoners.
Correct.
How the plantation owner were able to get the almost free labor back.
Right.
Yeah.
Or wasn't totally free, but was nearly free, was close. But you're right, so it didn't necessarily go away. So I mean, it may have come off my books, you know, as an asset, but I was able to at least still tap into the labor piece of it and get that back.
Right. And they went from legal slavery, and then after slavery was abolished, they went, of course, into the sharecropper system, which, you know, we know something about. And then they began to build this other institution, the slave, I mean, not slavery, but the prison system.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, you have a couple of options here. Okay, now that you're a legal slave, so you don't have anything, you have no skill sets, you have no land, and so you can come back and work for us, but guess what? You know, you're going to need land, you're going to need seas, you're going to need all of these resources, and so you're going to go into debt, in essence. Okay, you're going to owe us, and we're going to run the book, and we're going to determine, you know, what you need and what you owe. And so ultimately, they were put in a system where they never really could get out of debt. And then if you don't want to do that, we have laws that will put you in jail. And they figured that
If you didn't work your land, and the landowner had to go hire someone to work it for you, that went against you.
there you go. You're looking for that.
And you owe them for that, and then, like Tommy said, if you didn't pay your debt to me, then you could be thrown in jail for being in debt.
And then on top of that, if you go to jail, it's like, well, I'm going to sit up in jail. I get 3 hots and a cots, and it's like, well, no, because if you, there you go, we're going to lease you out to the same guy that was basically had you in slavery or indebted to in the first place. So
Did he
there
say
was,
up until like 1930 or 1940 that the state of Alabama, that this was 20% of the state's revenue was leased labor from prison. 20% of your revenue is leased labor. That's an amazing amount of money. That's an amazing fact.
I'll have to find the name of this shadowy corporation that is in the business of commoditizing manufactured goods from American federal prison.
Oh, really? Okay.
Huge.
I didn't think we did that. But I thought the license plate making and
very closely, it seems to me, very cautiously guarded existence, but it's a
So this leased labor in prison system still exists?
Still exists.
Oh, yes.
Oh, huge.
Really?
Huge industry, man.
Oh, I thought we gave it up for Lent or something. Oh, okay. I didn't know the country was still doing this.
No, in fact, the private prison system was designed to break the stranglehold that the federal government had on
The courts and
selling production
Okay.
products that are made by prisoners, and so it's a huge deal, man. And so they're still leasing prisoners out, you know.
There are some, I mean, it has been an eye-opening experience having to learn about law enforcement and corrections. And so you have counties around the country, you know, some of which, you know, I've seen firsthand. You know, there are county governments, the prisons will, in essence, farm out, for lack of a better term, the prisoners to go in everything from trash collection, cutting yards, providing services.
Really?
It saves millions and millions of dollars for the local government and their economy. And it's interesting because wouldn't people be afraid of that? You know, initially they might be concerned, but they're not going to put folks who are, you know, rapists or mass murderers out on work detail. But they have work detail in several prisons throughout the country. Of course, they'll have one of the corrections officers who are with them.
are you required to do this? Are you forced to do it as a prisoner, or are you paid to do it? Is it optional, or is it mandatory that you go out and work?
Well, they may get some, you know, minor, you know, benefits from it. Obviously, being outside of the
They're not being paid minimum wage to go out there and work.
Oh no,
Okay.
no, not at all. They're not getting paid any real money for it. But you know, the benefit of being outside of the prison for that period of time, and of course, they're going to have some officers who are out there with them, you know, armed to make sure that they don't get out of hand. But yeah, this is quietly being done around the country, and it saves local governments millions and millions of dollars.
And it's not
the
all-
economic impact.
Yeah, it's not manual labor, and this one gets back into you guys in the technology sphere. At one point, North Texas Tollway Authority, NTTA, had hired a prison system in Oklahoma to read license plate capture.
Really? Okay.
Who knew that it was somebody out there needing to check, you know, the image that captured with the decal on the front windshield? Big business.
Wow.
Big business. But there were prisoners reading those films.
Right.
Save the money,
Exactly.
you know?
I think one of the things that also jumped out at me was the net worth of black folks. In slavery, being worth anywhere from 20 trillion to 90 trillion, depending on whose estimate you're reading. And look at the net worth of black America today being, what do you say, about maybe 2% of America's world wealth, maybe 1.5. It's like we've gone backwards since slavery as far as being able to accumulate wealth. I know a lot of that is in our homes and 401ks now, but where it's not and where it's going to make the biggest impact is in business. I mean, you know, the work that you do at the TAC is the reason it's so important. If we don't establish a black economic base that's growing and vibrant, I'm not talking about just one-man shop. We talked about that, where the average black business, just one person making $100,000 a year or less. So that's really just more of a sole proprietor, contractor. But that's where most of the black businesses are. That's the space they're in. Yeah. They're not the 50 employees, 100 employees, 1,000 employees. Those are very few of the makeup. But we need more of those growing black businesses to make an impact to increase our black wealth. But like I said, the fact that overall the impact to our economy, that we had bigger impact when we were slaves than we have now, to me is an embarrassment.
We've been rocked to sleep, I think, and clearly that's something that's, again, ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
Why do we wake up, Charles? I mean, give us an answer.
Well,
Why do we wake up?
here's the deal. And again, so if we provide in context for going forward in improved economic health for black people, then if it is determined that capitalism is the best way for us to do this, then we got to get back to the fundamentals, controlling means of production. That means we got to make something.
We have to make something, that's true.
And unfortunately for
Can't
us,
be consumers.
against
Yes.
the overarching backdrop of technology, technology is helper. Technology is efficiency. Technology removes the need for labor.
True.
and enhances convenience. Well, if only benefit from improved access to technology is improved access to convenience, I can sit at home and shop rather than leave the house and shop.
That is true.
But the clothes were still made. We didn't make them.
You're right.
So we have effectively supported our own demise, our continued malaise in black. So we got to figure out why Papa was so adamant about his farmland. You know, we got to figure out if we're going to feed ourselves, if that's important. I joke about sometimes talking to young students and asking, where does corn come from? They say, Kroger.
Well, to them it does. I don't think they've ever seen it, because it's interesting you bring up this point, because I mean, if we go back maybe 50 some odd years ago, when you look at where the majority of our parents and grandparents lived, they were more rural, but now obviously it is more urban, and so they've never seen farms, they've never seen crops. Some of them have never seen a live cow or pig or chicken.
That's right. That's right. So if we're going to feed, clothe, and shelter, provide food, clothing, and shelter for ourselves, then there has to be a fundamental shift in the kinds of enterprises that we engage in. And it may flow against this other tide that's pushing us through enhanced technology. And so subsistence, if that's important, I offer that eating is pretty important.
Eating is pretty important.
You know, that
Right up there with Eric Warner. Right after Eric Warner.
After that, a place to live.
Yeah, a place to live in that order,
Yes.
And so that you clearly, if you talk about those, there were folk who could. One of my daddy's brothers was a carpenter, and he lived in Detroit. But I watched these brothers; they could build a house in 3 days.
Wow.
You know, I mean, and brick it. I mean, they were just phenomenal artists. They were craftsmen, clearly, but they were good at this. Find me a young brother who would dedicate his day with a hammer and nail.
Let me ask you this. I mean, you bring up a very good point, because I mean, my father's grandfather actually laid cement, and so he did construction work. And so I guess as we as a community, and maybe America has become more urban, you know, we've lost those skills. We've lost maybe the consciousness of being our own business people. I don't know that you can go back and invigorate that sense of entrepreneurship, other than the fact that, okay, I need to find another job because I lost mine. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is a topic of another session, but trying to turn the corner on being more economically self-sufficient, because most folks are, well, I'm comfortable, you know, with my day job. I don't have to do all this other stuff. I don't know that there's another answer.
Well, I call it an O'Neillism. Have to is different from want to. You know, you sit up and talk, I sure want something, you know, do
right.
You know, but when you have to.
Right. You find a way to get it done.
And the facts are that we have to get a grasp on this deal. You know, if the education of future generations is important, and I think we've established that it is, then ensuring that they get the education that allows them to get to a point where they're concerned about handing off to a future generation. If we can't keep them alive, eating and drinking water for the next 3 generations, we just bumping our gum.
But see, also, you talk about technology. If you look at, like right now, you talk about shopping online. So the store in my neighborhood offers an online service now. I don't even go to the store anymore. Mm-hmm. I really, they have everything on their website. I mean, I do a search, I find every product.
That's right.
I order it, I pay for it. They give me a time to come there and pick it up. I go there, they bring it out to my car, they load the groceries up, and I drive off. Mm-hmm. Even if you wanted to open up a grocery store right now, lined up black farmers to provide the food, black distributors to process it, can it, package it, and deliver it to the store. if you're not ready to embrace the type of technology now, we can at least order some of the products online, do something. If you don't start integrating that, which sometimes the black business is slow to do, even if you get this off the ground, you're already behind the people who are doing this. You're right, the technology is making it more convenient, but people want the convenience.
But again, not disputing that at all. The caveat I put on is unless your life depended on it, and that's the way I approach what I do every day. Is that this is such a critical need. Controlling the one last medium of exchange we have for the marketplace is our financial resource. Since our labor has no value, so the only thing that we're able to return to the marketplace is whatever financial resources we have.
Unless you're in the NFL or the NBA.
That's a whole other one there, man. But
another topic, another show.
And so we have
That's
to.
those Cowboys that draft. Don't get me started.
We just have to again fine tune our rate of exchange. And so if the market is comfortable telling us that we are valued because of our $1.3 trillion worth of consuming power, then we have to figure out a way to exact a different return. Implicit in business relationships is I give you some money, you give me something that I think is that value. We're not getting back unless you just want a pork chop, you know what I'm saying. But I think that there is another conversation that can be had in the marketplace as relates to the value of our contribution to the economy. And I think that we like to skirt around or dance around because that's going to be hard work and that's going to be probably not nice civil conversations about exacting a different rate of return on our investment in the marketplace. And so if, as we talked earlier, if you want to sell me groceries, then I got to build a store. That's the deal. If you're going to sell me a car, I got to be able to sell you the oil. That's the deal. If I'm going to live in your city, you're going to send a police car within 2 minutes. That's a deal.
Right.
And so we just have to get better at exacting the terms of the relationship. And again, I think that the hard work of that is confounded or impeded by all of the other kind of stimulus that we have to take in going to Wakanda.
Gotcha. And I guess as we begin to kind of close this out, try to round this up.
So what was your take on the employment thing? When you talk about the resumes and the job applicants and the income disparity between people who are hired and to do the same job over a lifetime of how much money you're losing, spending power that you don't have because you've been paid less to do the same work. So what was your take on Tom? What was your opinion? What did you feel when you talk about the hiring disparity? Especially the names on the resume, that really jumped out at me. Because if my parents had sort of given me a different name, Jimmy Stewart, you can't really tell,
right.
I guess, if my name was, I'm black or white. And maybe if, on the phone, if they can't tell, they may be shocked when they first meet me or something, but it's too late at that point. But if they had named me something different, little Ray Ray or something, or Pookie, I could be in a different economic situation now than I am now, just over a name.
Right. No, I think that brings up a very good question. So a couple of words come to mind for me. There's propaganda, which we brought up a little bit earlier. There's leverage, people who have power, control, and value. Because ultimately, if you're talking about a piece of paper, not two individuals, but a piece of paper with the same content on it in terms of experience, the only difference is one name that connotes a certain perception in terms of who that person is and what they look like versus another one, which is obviously someone with the same skill sets, whether it's on paper or live. It's propaganda. Your perception of someone's value and worth to you because of the way that they look. Number two, how comfortable you feel with them. You know, if someone who looks like me and I happen to be Caucasian comes in and me feeling comfortable with bringing them into my company to value versus someone who is black or someone who is Hispanic or someone who is Asian, all of those have provide an emotional response for that potential employer. And then there's leverage. Who are the people who are in control of making the ultimate decision? Who do I want in my company? Who do I feel is going to bring more value? And then, you know, ultimately, you know, it just comes down to value and worth. And one of the things that I was, you know, going to bring up is how do you look at determining how you generate more value for your own life and the sustainability of your own community, whether it's yours and or someone else's. But ultimately, who has the power to make the decision, which in corporate America typically aren't black folk, on the most part, because again, we're a very small part of that population. 2, leverage. Who do I feel comfortable with? Who do I want there? And 3, just the value on life. So we brought up that earlier. If we make a certain economic impact to the country, but we're only getting so much value out of that, it's just simple math. It's simple math.
That's true. I wish we would find a way to do more for ourselves, more internal support, more groundswell business-wise, that we have a need that exists, that we find a way to pool our own resources and try to make it happen as best we can. I just don't know now if there's enough trust internally between us to make it happen. I don't think that will ever happen now. I used to think that maybe one day it would happen, but I'm not convinced anymore that it ever will, because the level of distrust in the black community now seems to grow. I'm not even sure why that distrust even exists. We haven't done that much to each other to have this much animosity.
But you really do know, because it's externally derived.
Exactly.
You know,
Ultimately.
yeah.
Ultimately.
I mean,